So one more tier list for Guilty Gear Strive Season 3.5. You might be like, why? You made one back in March before Arc Revo. So there's a couple of reasons. Reason number one, we have a definite time of when there's going to be an update to the game. Actually, 2 updates. So there's going to be another small winter style patch. I guess we might call this the summer patch. After Evo, and then season 4 is supposed to start in fall, either in October or November, so it's a perfect time to do another tier list. But the other reason why I want to do another tier list is my opinion has actually changed quite a bit. So we've actually played this version basically twice as long as 3.0, and since before Arc Revo, because I posted my original tier list at around the beginning of March, between Arc Revo itself, the World Finals, and Evo Japan, Combo Breaker, and a variety of other tournaments, and playing and talking to other people, my opinion has changed on the game quite a bit. Last time I said 3.5 is pretty similar to 3.0, and it definitely is not. So in this video, we're going to talk about 2 main things. So we're going to talk about the tier list itself and just how I rank the characters, but also we're going to talk about what actually changed. So if you want to know what actually changed, in the description below it should be timestamp, unless I'm trolling, and there will be a section called what changed since last time. You can skip to that, but don't skip, because that would be cool if you watch the video and listen to me yap about characters. So first, I must bless you with the tier list itself. So for a while now, I haven't been doing letter rankings. I actually get really annoyed when people are like, oh, the lowest tier needs to be D or F. I don't really like those discussions. That's honestly its own topic. So first I want to explain the ranks, since I have them all labeled instead of letters. I mainly started doing it this way because I feel like the devs are just much better at making characters than they used to be in the past. Might be a little bit of spicy take, but I just think there's way less accidentally terrible characters at this point in fighting games compared to 2010s and even earlier. So the top tier is goats, so consistent. They win a lot, consistent top 8s. No one's surprised to see these characters in top 8s. There's always at least one, is a very important statement, because sometimes multiple of these characters could be in top 8 and you would not be surprised. For wins, these characters are also consistent, but they're not quite as much as the people above them, and it's pretty uncommon to see multiple in a top 8. And these characters generally have some flaw that actually matters. So the characters in the top tier, they also have flaws too, but their flaws are, let's say, borderline negligible compared to the characters in the winning tier. So then we have good chance to top 8. So these characters are somewhat consistent. These are characters that people like kind of whisper about, like, isn't this character better than you think? Or another thing about characters in this tier is that people who don't know how to fight these characters will tell you with a straight face these characters are super downplayed and busted. That's a very clear sign as far as these 4 characters. It is pretty uncommon to see multiple of these characters in a top 8, but you wouldn't really be surprised to see them. It's just not that common. And this stems from a combination of matchups and just little problems, or even like character design. So then you have the gatekeeper characters. Sometimes I call these bracket ruiners, but at the moment I don't really get this vibe. So specifically here is these are characters that have polarizing matchups, or they're just specifically really good counterpick characters. They're just really good at fighting like very specific things, and when you see them in those matchups, they look amazing. And when you see them in other matchups, you're like, dude, like, what is the point of playing this character? It is pretty uncommon to see somebody go very far consistently with these characters solo. And the line for like what I think a tournament player would consider a good character is here as well. Then you have, this is a little wordy, good when they're cooking but with notable flaws. So I think it's pretty straightforward. When the character is doing what they're supposed to do, the character looks amazing. And when they're not doing that, you're like, dude, this character doesn't work. It is hard for them to make deep runs, but Guilty Gear traditionally is a character specialist game, and Strive is the same. So all of these characters have character specialists who have pushed this character to their limits. So that's where you're seeing the people who push these characters to their limits these are people who have found a way or a path to get to a favorable condition enough that they could push through bad matchups. So a lot of these characters have seen top 8s, or specifically in the case of Johnny, have had a major winning result. So Johnny won a World Tour event, for example, right? That being said, it is clear that these characters have flaws or problems against the rest of the cast. And the last tier is niche or power crept. So these are characters that are either really good at a specific thing, or people don't invest time into them, so they don't get the juice that they need, or because of changes, because of patches, just the other characters just outpower them. And yeah, with that in mind, let's begin the tier list. So the first character we're going to talk about today is Zato. So he's a puppet character. So what he does is he summons a different character that you control individually, and you can control him by either releasing buttons or doing a command. So Zato is the definition of aggressively power crept. So this character performed extremely well in Season 2. There were many high-level Zato players. And this character is very polarizing because Zato players try to tell people that like he wasn't broken, because there is actually a ton of counterplay for him. But he's a very hard character to learn how to fight, and you have to make choices very quickly against him. And if you're not familiar against him, then it's very hard to fight. They went really ham with his nerfs, so it is pretty much universally agreed among high-level players that Zato is pretty much the worst character in the game right now. That being said, he is not without his strengths and weaknesses. So one, he has a very good anti-air. He has a very good 6p, it knocks down, and it's just really hard to like challenge this or make this whiff. You basically need tricky movement options in order to actually bait him or beat him doing this. And he also has very good anti-air as well. His offense is very strong and very well structured as well, because a lot of strong players work together to develop the character. That being said, we have to talk about his weaknesses. So he has a ton of weaknesses. The main thing is that system mechanics are just incredibly powerful against him right now, because he has more time on eddy recovery. So you can use things like YRC and burst to basically lock him out of the thing that helps him win the game, because he needs eddy to mount his safe offense. He also has a lot of conversion problems. For example, he's not really good at converting multiple jabs. He generally has to commit or spend resource. And you might say boo-hoo to this, but right now the conversion ability in this game is much higher than on launch. And frankly, the two characters on screen right now, Baiken and Zato, have some of the most problems converting hits in the entire game right now. His HP is also quite low. He traditionally is pretty strong with positive bonus, but with the shorter positive bonus, he doesn't get as much advantage from it as he used to, even though he's still pretty good. And to be honest, there's actually more specifics about what's weaker about him, but these general things actually take a lot away from the character. And if you're curious about more, my teammate John Fontene actually has a video on his channel about Zato's matchups, and he goes into far more detail about the little things that kind of add up, stack up, that Zato struggles with. So then you have Bedman. So Bedman's a pretty unique type of character. He's an unusual character that sets up offense from safe ranges. So first, strength. So 1, wide wild assault, and 2, he has really good pressure that's hard to learn how to fight. Bedman's animations are kind of odd, and then also just not a lot of people play him. So if you're not used to playing against him, everything kind of looks like nothing, and people really hold Bedman's offense. Bedman's basic neutral plan is actually pretty simple, because special moves just activate automatically after you do one. Also, the character leans towards development because, again, not a lot of people play this character, and the character doesn't have a ton of top player representation, so technically the character has a lot of potential, which is always a good thing about the character. Finally, the character has a lot of guard crush moves, so they have a bunch of opportunities to both continue offense, do very powerful strike throw, and more. For weaknesses, despite Bedman having a good defense modifier, the character has no guts. It's at the end of his life bar. Bedman dies very fast. So for reference, Slayer has a similar defense modifier, slightly better, it's 0.96, but Slayer has 3 guts. So this same combo I did to Bedman You notice how it took a couple of extra hits to kill Slayer is because his guts is better. Another big problem with Bedman comes from his size. So the character is big, kind of slow, making them a pretty easy target while they're moving. And the character has a slow, heavy backdash, which means that their backdash is pretty reactable compared to some backdashes in the game. The last character we have in this group is Testament. So Testament is the definition of a mid-range zoner. So this character kind of dances in and out of mid-range using big projectiles and setting up pressure, doing chip damage. Testament is what we call a two-step character and that involves this crow. So Testament is at their strongest when the stain state is applied, but in order to have the tracking crow, you need to do a fireball first. With no fireball, then you just do this crow that goes off the top of the screen. Yes, when the crow is coming back, you can shoot a crow like a normal fireball, but that involves shooting a crow first. So no matter what, you have to do something before you have the crow go somewhere else. So what's good about this character? One, Testament is quite slippery, so not only do they have the DLC 2K, but also they have a DLC backdash. So 2K has a low profile, where other moves get hit no problem. And then Testament's backdash recovers faster than other characters that have 5-frame backdashes. An easy way of seeing this is with round start Wild Assault. So on round start, if I do White Wild Assault, Testament is able to block, where another character with a 5-frame invincible backdash will get hit. This is because Testament recovers faster than the majority of 5-frame invincible backdashes. Testament is also quite good at building meter and doing chip damage. So while this sequence has plenty of gaps, if the opponent is not trained against it, then they will have to basically watch Testament do a bunch of chip damage and build a bunch of meter. And Testament actually gets so much from this that I'm able to fast PRC and still be close to 50 and keep going. Testament also has very good normals outside of 2K. So they have very large normals like 2S, good preemptive normals like 2H, and one of the best 6Ps in the game in that it's fast and quite large. And I mean it when I say it's quite large. So for weaknesses, one of the biggest problems that this character has is they're both a two-step character and what they want to do is pretty interactable compared to other characters that have a similar archetype or playstyle to Testament. No matter what, it requires knowledge of what the Testament player is doing. But many characters in this game that are considered very good either win for hitting you right away, or they can beat you just for making you block something random. So Testament needing to set up and then also have these small guessing games in their pressure off like every single thing that they do is pretty rough, considering that another weakness that this character has is they're not that good at mixing characters up. You have to do a lot of system stuff like dust or multiple jump-ins in order to mix people up. The good news is that in Stain State, you do have a dust that's safe. Right, I got hit for holding up. However, that does require getting the crow first. Testament also has problems doing offensive structures that other characters of this type tend to have. So you've probably seen people do like BRC, double overhead or low. And this problem in pressure doesn't just apply to their optimal state, but also just to their pressure in general. So very commonly, there's this 2K2D thing that's talked about a lot, where Testament has a gap between their 2K2D, and it's pretty hard to compensate for this. You can do 2K6P, which is airtight, which is fine. You can try to catch the backdash with 6H, but this could be delay mashed pretty easily. 2K is also good, but this also loses to delay mash. And with good timing, you won't get hit by the sweep. So Testament really has to accommodate for these things. They have to kind of overextend, adjust quite a bit on their offense all the time. So then we go to the next group of characters. And the first character I want to talk about is Potemkin. So Potemkin is a big body grappler character who starts the round generally disadvantaged against most characters, but is very, very good at mounting comebacks. So what's good about Potemkin? One is he just has huge range despite not being very mobile. Annoying to deal with armor moves unless he has specific counterplay. White Wild Assault, as we mentioned, which is not only a plus on block guard crush, which favors him because he's a strike throw character, but also it is invincible so you can't strike into it. Since he has a high HP pool, it also means he probably will be able to burst you more than once per round unless you're an especially high damage character. He will likely have more than 2 White Wild Assaults per round, and he is definitely going to get 50 meter once per round, and he has very powerful meter options. Between sneaking in pop busters all sorts of ways, armor into fast RC, armor into pop buster, which pop buster is disjoint, so swinging a fast move will generally lose to pop buster here, and armor move into his 50 meter super that's incredibly difficult to deal with. Potemkin with 50 meter is incredibly powerful. Speaking of Guard Crush, he has the original super strong Guard Crush move, Guard to Impact. Guard Crush doesn't have throw protection, so a lot of the traditional ways you would beat Strike Throw basically doesn't work. He's punishing my 2P here moments before impact. So weaknesses. So one, he's big, so things that don't work on most characters work on him. There's all sorts of unique offensive structures that work on him specifically because of how big he is. Like we mentioned of Bedman, since he's a heavy character, he has more invincibility on his backdash, but it's easier to react to. His buttons are generally slow, so they did buff the head pat 5p, but a lot of his other buttons are quite slow. His 2p is slow, his 2k is like 10 frames, so he's not really good at mashing. If you've ever asked why do Potemkin players constantly slam on Mega Fist and Wild Assault, it's because they can't really do much else. They have to either backdash, back Mega Fist, use a system mechanic, which is kind of hard to use in this game, like IB or IBFD because the window is small, or pray that 5p will work. And since his buttons are not generally good for defense, he has to take more risks than other characters do. So even though he has the HP to do so, it means that there are many players that can't really play him, because if you're not comfortable with taking these type of risks, it's going to feel really, really bad playing him. So these things kind of culminate in a weakness of Potemkin starts the round late, because a lot of his strengths revolve around having meter. Alright, so next character we're talking about is Elphelt, and Elphelt is a fast rushdown character that snowballs with her powerful Rekka. So if you haven't been keeping up with Elphelt, her shotgun stance from Exert have been changed into this thing called Chain Lollipop, where she has fast overheads and lows, and she has the ability to reset the situation by going back to beginning, doubling up with a more unsafe but still unreactable high-low, or exiting the stance safely with her hated shotgun from Exit. So what's good about this character? One, she's incredibly fast. They actually nerfed Ramlethal speed a couple patches ago, and a lot of people have said they basically gave this speed to Elphelt. She really books it. Her conversion ability is pretty good. With the addition of Red Wild Assault, pokes that used to lead to not the end of the world situations started leading to wall break and game winning. So being able to convert really matters. Elphelt generally gets knockdowns off basically everything she does, depending on the situation. Her Rekka is also a standout thing about her. If you do no research into this character, this thing will feel impossible to defend. There's plenty of counterplay actually to this, especially if you have a meterless reversal. And it's especially good against characters with weak or slow backdashes, like the heavy characters and A.B.A. The speed of the high-low is good enough to call it even an equalizer in matchups, because she just has a way of hitting you if she could make you block the Rekka. Remember that thing I said about how some characters can beat you for making you block? Elphelt is definitely one of them. She also has some pretty unique neutral tools. One really important thing is, does the character have like tools that kind of warp neutral or force characters to use tools they don't normally use, and Elphelt has it in this grenade move. So the big thing about this is that she becomes incredibly small, and it becomes really hard to call out this move. And it not only warps neutral but also offense too, because if you think she's going to go into the Rekka of some normals, you can 6p, but some characters do not have the ability to just 6p this grenade. So you're required to do anything between like an air throw, a reaction jump in, or maybe a crazy option. Also, between the grenade, her speed, and her tracking projectile, tracking but lightly, as it ricochets off the floor or wall or whatever's nearby, Elphelt is able to actually play at basically any range pretty safely. Combine this with relatively large buttons that, while yes, these buttons do have flaws, she's fast enough and she can move around enough that I don't think it's that huge of a deal. And her neutral is actually quite good. So if she has all this great stuff, then why do we say she has notable flaws? So the first one comes from HP. She just takes a lot of damage. Her damage modifier is not great. It is, to my knowledge, nerfed from Exerd by quite a significant amount. Another one is similarly to Testament. A lot of the things she does is interactable. So if you know counterplay to what she does, you can have a very big impact on how they actually run offense on you. Even top tier characters have interactable offense, but the risk return is kind of what makes it okay. Where in Elphelt's case, she's not getting like massive return for calling you out most of the time, unless your character just has poor options for fighting her offense in general. Examples include something like this. So our 2H is -4, and yes, I could simply 6P this, but by doing 5P, I really hedged my bet. If I do 6P here, or God forbid parry, then, you know, I might not get so much. But here, I'll get a punish. And she's crouching, so I get a pretty reliable combo. Where here, I trade. So her main response would be to do grenade, which is committal. So if I choose, I have various ways of sitting and waiting and reacting. Her gunshots, while good and letting her attack from very far ranges, they also have a lot of recovery. Not to mention being counter hit state for a long time. And like I mentioned, a lot of her normals are low profilable or easy to 6P, so she does have to hedge on running in a lot more than other characters. So the next character we have to talk about is Johnny. So Johnny is another two-step mid-range screen control type character that looks amazing when he's running the match, but he has a couple of important problems. Main strengths, he's another character that has a fast backdash despite having a 5-frame invincible backdash. Is one of his main both neutral tools and defensive tools. The range on his buttons are overall very good. This is far slash at 9 frames, his 2S is huge, his 5H is huge, his 6H is huge, a lot of his buttons are huge. He also lunges at you with a bunch of attacks. His air buttons are especially good. This is jump slash, his jump kick, and his jump H. Jump kick might be one of his best, or if not his best air normal. He actually has quite a bit of HP. I mean, this combo does huge damage, of course, but he is quite a tank. Because of his high life pool, you can expect him to likely get 50 meter no matter what. He has easy, strong 50/50s. Since air misfinders are overhead. Not to mention having deal to power up misfinder for more strike throw and high-low. And he's just generally threatening with meter. Between Vault PRC, Nzinga RC, 6K shenanigans, and getting high-low without having a card. For weaknesses, the elephant in the room has always been the fact that he can't dash block. It is a big deal. It mainly means that against strike throw characters or characters that are slightly minus, he can't hedge his bet by doing dash block. They did give him the ability to dash jump, but they did not let him dash block. He's also quite tall, so there are things that work on him that don't hit other characters. His buttons have a lot of recovery on whiff. And finally, his frame data is not great. So while Misfinder is kind of hard to react to because it has a low hit stop, it is -15, so you will have a different punish depending on your character. The characters that tend to do well into him have really good punishes into this, and being able to punish this very easily makes his miss cancel pressure weaker because they're less willing to send it on Misfinder because if you block it, they die. So the next character is Baiken. And Baiken is a slow mid-range defensive type character that has options in all phases of the game. If you don't know what these phases are, these are block string offense, block string defense, neutral, and knockdown. So what's good about Baiken? First, her buttons are amazing. So she has one of the best far slashes in the game, a great JS that's very huge and really good against both projectiles and people just hanging around in the air, JD to snipe people and retreat safely at the same time, a very active JH, Yozan-sen alters her air momentum, enabling all sorts of trickery. Her kicks are both actually quite good, both active and have very specific use. The fast 4-frame 5p and a fast 6p. She also has a very good spread of defensive options because of parry. So parry is 7-frame active, her backdash is 5-frame active, this is 4 frames, throw is 2, jumping is 4. So you have a lot of numbers you could use against your opponent, not even counting meter and more advanced defensive techniques. Once Baiken gets meter, she's incredibly powerful. Like Johnny, she gets access to an instant overhead that's very strong and leads to a lot of damage. There are many a powerful combo that start from this instant overhead. And her damage is pretty high situationally. She also is in contention to have the best throw in the game because she has very strong mix-up, very strong left-right into a high meter building combo. And again, she's very strong with meter. Weaknesses. So, one, she's just not very fast. Compared to A.B.A, she might seem very quickly. But the other extreme is jealousy mode, and I outspeed Baiken by quite a bit. You'll notice too, A.B.A doesn't really have like traction. You see how she slides really quickly. But Baiken actually has a lot. She doesn't actually go very far. She pretty much stops instantly, which does have its uses, but it's very painful when you're fighting zoners or mid-range set play zoners, of which there are a ton of in this game. Another problem she has is her main mid-screen defensive tools don't matter that much against some characters. And this is kind of a product of just properties of moves and what they've given other characters and the conversion ability being better over and over these past few patches. So generally, I like to say that Baiken has 3 core tools in neutral: her amazing far slash, H Kabari, which is a very active disjointed poke that has a massive range, and ID back to Tommy. ID back to Tommy has very low block stun and hit stun, so it's very hard to actually hit him from this. And it's pretty hard to tell from an ID back to Tommy. This is actually a neutral jump to Tommy, so I could show it more clearly. But Baiken lands first, and then the Tommy falls. And since the ID back to Tommy is much shorter than previous Guilty Gear titles, one strategy people will use against this will be to swing into it, because if they hit her or make her block, then the Tatami will hit them, but they'll have an advantage. Something like this. Some characters like Sin just deal with this tool trivially, so I am not able to combo off this. However, off this, he's killing me. Off this, he's also killing me. So while these 3 moves are good, Sin is obviously an extreme. This is like one of her worst matchups, but there are characters who don't really care about her having defensive tools. So when you see a Baiken player constantly running at the opponent, that should tell you, oh, this is a character that doesn't let Baiken do what she wants to do. And there's quite a bit of that in the game right now. Baiken has good guts, but she doesn't have really good HP, and she's also a character where you have to engage in risk return poorly on purpose. This is because of the parry and the fast smashing. You can't just let people do stuff non-stop, and this is where the interaction comes from on defense. But being wrong on a parry usually means that you're getting hit by close slash, which means you are omega dying, because everyone in the game's best starter is this. And there are a lot of matchups where one of the main things you have to accept is that risk return is just not in your favor. She also has a ton of conversion problems. Again, where most characters convert easily off far pokes, or in the case they might have problems converting off something. In Ram's case, she has to be here. For characters like these, if they have problems converting or they don't actually get something very good from mid or far range, a lot of these characters now have red Wild Assault. So Baiken has blue Wild Assault, which means you'd have to go into 5H normally. But since this is one of her best moves, her 5H is actually smaller than her far slash. So it's not very common you get far slash 5H blue Wild Assault. You have to be in here to do it. Then you have the 2H problem of when you're far, your H copy doesn't reach, which means you either need to use Wild Assault, which is half your burst, or you need to spend 50 meter on RC. Very often when you go above a certain amount of hits, your Tatami just won't work. 5P 6K is range dependent. 6P does nothing on normal hits, so unless you're absolutely point blank, which if you remember 6P is both a counter poke and an anti-air. Even on counter hit here, I'm not going to get anything. So of course, I could do H Copity, but in the case I punish something, I get nothing. Yozansen pops up instead of having a launch, which makes air versus air conversions much more difficult. They did give her this upgraded version of Kenja that vacuums towards her, but this does cost meter. There's usually something better you can do, and when you see Kenja, it's mostly for the super high damage funny gun confirms. The conversion thing matters a ton. If you think I suck, then I don't really know who else to reference. Usually I have another player I could reference. I don't know, look at Tempest Twitter or something. But the conversion thing matters a ton. It's probably the number one thing having her in this rank. And if she was able to convert better, she would probably be along characters like Geo and Chipp. So next we have Millia. So Millia is a fast mid-range character that baits reactions and punishes into very scary mix-ups. So what's good about Millia? So one, her defense is surprisingly good right now. This is not a character you normally associate with defense, but this is actually a pretty typical classic Guilty Gear thing of why does the Pixie character have such good defense? Where in Exerd and XX, it was a combination of her jump P making her smaller, or her buck smaller, so she's able to escape things that other characters can't escape, and her backdash being incredibly fast and having quite a bit of invincibility for how fast it was. In this game, it's a combination of her backdash being unreactable, her 2P being 4 frames, and her high jump. Millia's backdash being god in neutral is just a very traditional Guilty Gear thing as well. This thing is quite literally invisible. Most characters have to overextend to chase this. She has many air options, so her air dash is faster than other characters, despite seeing the little seal that people jump off of. Millia has the fastest air dash in the game. The trade-off is it goes half the distance of a normal air dash. So 2 of her air dashes look like 1 normal air dash. But she also has many air options, which if you play the game online, I'm sure you've seen Millia players do this and all sorts of things at the top of the screen that are pretty difficult to deal with. She has an aerial version of Elphelt's grenade, or another way of putting it is that Elphelt has a ground version of Millia's move, the replacement for Silent Force called Capel, which is a move that is designed to beat anti-airs, which Millia is pretty good at. Main difference being that she has to actually be close to you to do this, unlike Pin. She has many simple, strong mix-up structures, both with and without meter, and just a variety of tricks. For weaknesses, she has a lot of system weaknesses that have carried over from previous Guilty Gear games. So she both builds risk quickly and has a bad defense modifier. So making mistakes or even blocking a lot is very, very rough. Also, despite her speed, she's not doing a lot in neutral, so she's not actually that great at building meter unless she hits you. She's pretty poor at attacking from safe ranges, so again, despite all the movement and stuff, she generally is attacking you. Her main ranged moves are things like S-Disc, which is a mid-range projectile. For a mix-up character, she doesn't really win by making you block, she needs to hit you. And specifically in her case, while there are a ton of tricks off H-Disc, her throw is generally not considered to be that scary. So for a character that has to hit you to win, not having a strong throw is pretty suspect. And now we move on to the Gatekeeper. So the first character we have to talk about is Faust. So Faust is an item throw character that mixes defensive and offensive neutral plays based on the state of the game. So what's good about Faust? One is his amazing backwalk. He is smooth, and compared to his forward walk where he kind of lumbers, his backwalk is actually incredibly fast. This combined with his really good pokes and his slew of anti-air options between Carling, straight up using 6P, his crouching anti-airs, and big buttons make him pretty difficult to approach in neutral. A huge thing for him is that items will go away on hit or block, so items are just very, very strong in general in this game. And there's no restriction. Typically in anime fighters, item throw characters can usually only throw one item. Usually. He has no restriction on this, so all sorts of shenanigans can happen if you allow them to. Items not going away on hit implies he has multiple bursts because they can interrupt your combo or offense if you don't have counterplay prepared, and this is different by character. So, what are Faust's weaknesses? So one, he has both low HP and low guts. Another is, despite him being pretty small when crouching, he himself is a pretty big character, so even though you do have to compensate for crawl, getting him to actually stand up is pretty valuable. He does actually have some conversion problems, mainly in that he is still one of the characters that do not convert jabs. His 2P is absolutely huge, and he generally cannot convert this. He actually has pretty poor frame data. And a lot of things he does are vulnerable to things with upper body invincibility. Finally, because his items are random, the amount of control he has per match kind of varies. So usually items are like icing on the cake above characters can't handle his neutral, rather than his items are so overwhelming that the cast can't handle them. So the next character I want to talk about is Axl. And Axl is a mid-range character who zones with normals. So for strengths, this is another pretty slippery character. Similar to Testament, they have a low profile 2K, and Axl is very good retreating because since the air dash back is shorter than previous Guilty Gear games, he's actually very good at controlling the mid-range because you don't know if he's going to pull up with a move, wait, or slightly retreat back. Because he zones with normals, he's not only good at stopping characters who are not fast, like Baiken, but he's also good at stopping two-step characters. Also, despite the character not having a lot of like special moves or crazy like setups or anything, he's very active in neutral, moving in and out of ranges, constantly doing stuff, and the general strategy is to kind of take it slow against him, so he's actually pretty good at building meter. Rainwater is a best-in-class move in this game, retreating, putting him airborne, and also making him plus, and also vacuuming people. And Axl's damage is actually surprisingly high for him being a mid-range zoner. So, weaknesses. Because of how good his retreating moves are, Axl tends to corner himself a lot, and once he's here, it's actually pretty hard for him to escape. Also, since he retreats a lot, fast characters are his bane. Things he does are generally minus. Even things that we assume to be plus, like close slash, is minus. This is actually -1, where Chipp has a +1 close slash. His cancel options are generally not great, despite me saying that Rainwater is a best-in-class move, which it is. If people read this, there's all sorts of ways they could deal with it, and typically his moves leave him negative on block, which is why they gave him this tornado move, but even this is disadvantage. A lot of his pokes have dead zones. This matters more if you can specifically run under it. Finally, his defense seems good because of his super busted 2K, but his super is actually pretty weak. So not only is it slow, it is safe on block, but there's a gap in the middle. And to top that all off, he also doesn't have good HP. So next we have A.B.A. So she's a character that can power herself up and swing the momentum of a match in her favor. So what's good about A.B.A? One, her defense is surprisingly good. The main thing she has going for her is a long-reaching poke. So this is actually 12 frames, but this is one of the best ways of reversing pressure when people are staying far from her. She has a huge active kick buttons and also a 4-frame 2P. In general, she's always able to convert into a knockdown, and knockdowns with her are extremely valuable. Her conversion ability is good in general. So her key grab might miss depending on the range. There you go. But Rekka's work reliably. But not only that, her conversion ability in jealousy mode is also amazing. She is able to generally wall break as long as you have the resources and the awareness to do it. And circling back, this tied into defense, right? So this is from mashing 2P in the corner into transform. She has a lot of HP. She's quite a tank, so it's pretty reliable for her to have meter. And her offense in both modes are good. 2-3K is -1, so if you don't have a 4-frame normal, it could be pretty difficult to reverse the situation. And her key grab is actually a +2 guard crush. So with good practice, you can quite easily throw people out of normals. Jealousy Rage has her extremely powerful overhead kick, on top of various ways of doing instant overheads off jump-ins. Her last strength is she actually has a bunch of things that kind of like warp neutral plus our reaction checks. So this recovers very quickly, this recovers very quickly, this recovers very quickly, and this goes through mid pokes. So you might think to strike at it with a low, but if she uses her overhead kick, then she's going to hit you. The Jealousy mode version will beat things that the normal mode will not. On top of Jealousy Rage Rekka beating 6Ps, and massive range of 5H, and a far slash she can convert into a full combo into wall break, which is extremely valuable, and she does not have to use wild assault to do so. For weaknesses, her main problems all revolve around jealousy. So normal mode is actually quite good, but it's weaker for sure when characters don't have to interact with you directly. So you're thinking about characters like A.B.A, Bridget, Axl, Asuka, any character that backdashes a lot and swings from really far, she kind of has troubles with. And of course, when she hits you, she builds a ton of resource right away. So if you don't have the ability to actually touch them, your main way of building jealousy gauge is by using this parry. People call it a parry, but it's not frame 1 like Baiken's parry. It actually starts on frame 7, so you can counter hit the startup. But it is quite good if you actually get it off. So on to the next group. So the first character we're going to talk about is Slayer. So Slayer is a power type character that forces guesses between his neutral game and his offense. So for strengths, for starters, he has good HP, so he's not taking a lot of damage. He's definitely getting meter. His conversion ability is good, so outside of just simple combos, but on counter hit, he does massive damage with pile bunker loops. He has many moves with frame advantage. And overall, his game plan is just simple and straightforward. His main weakness comes from defense. So, like Johnny, he does not have the ability to dash block. In previous Guilty Gear games, he had a technique that let him carry his backdash invulnerability to special moves called BDC. This was removed. I will not say mean things about it, but it was removed and replaced with this special move Hand of Doom, which you could do out of backdash. It is a good move, but it's hard to use, and it's much easier to just use moves like parry, which even this move's kind of hard to use, or something more straightforward like a DP. His backdash is also very counterintuitive, so it's slow and has a long total duration, and once he starts moving, he's vulnerable. He's actually only invincible when he's invisible, so it's actually pretty hard to time using his backdash. Another problem he has is his neutral is linear, so even though he is very good at approaching, he basically, especially because he can't dash, is coming at you directly or trying to use special properties on moves like 2H or Dandy Step to maneuver around. He doesn't really have moves that stall him in the air, so if you're a character that's good at controlling space, you're probably pretty good at bullying Slayer in neutral. Once he gets meter, he's fine, but before that, it's actually pretty tough. So the next character I want to talk about is Chipp. So Chipp is a fast character who overwhelms opponents with speed and offense. And his first strength, of course, is speed. He is pretty much the fastest character in the game. A.B.A in Jealousy mode is actually comparable, but she needs to be in Jealousy mode. Millia is slightly slower. Because of this, he's able to treat whiffs as either a whiff punish or just being plus. This might not look like anything to you, but it's actually pretty hard because even if the Chipp player misses the whiff punish, he's so fast that if you try to do something else, he's going to hit you. This is a reason why you'll see a lot of high-level players literally standing in place doing kicks or dashing and pressing clicks, because it's hard for Chipp players to react to these things as opposed to something slower like a heavy slash or a force slash. His defense is overall pretty good. He has a 3-frame normal and 5P. He has a great dash block, great dash jump, and multiple jumping options. A DP, and while having a normal backdash as far as numbers, it's 5-frame invincible and 20 frames total, it goes quite far. Chipp is actually quite good at building meter. So while this pressure sequence is extended and there are a lot of things I can do, it is pretty difficult to actually challenge Chipp. So if you choose the safe route and try to wait it out, he's just going to build meter incredibly quickly. On top of that, he's pretty good at just breaking the wall in general. and he has a variety of tricky offensive options in block strings. His main weaknesses, the famous one is that he doesn't have a lot of HP. This is pretty extreme in this game. Another problem comes from his block string offense, so if you play Chipp, you have to be comfortable with people fighting out of your offense. While it's hard to do, the point is that it's possible, so this is probably the hardest part about playing this character. Also, despite having some best-in-class normals, a lot of his normals are weak to kicks, especially if they're active. Next up we have Giovanna. Giovanna is a fast character with both good mix-ups and mental stack. This is another character that's pretty good at whiff punishing. She's quite slippery, so she has this step dash that you can control by either using FD, canceling into a normal, or just stopping yourself. And her backdash is actually slightly above average since it's 19 frames and not 20. This is despite it having 5 frames of invincibility. Her block string offense is famously quite good between having a lot of advantage, being able to reset, and having favorable positioning. The buffs being that she gets a damage and defense boost and does chip damage depending on how much meter she has. So if you look at this sequence, I'm going to just let Geo cook. This is a 100 meter Geo. So this is when she does the most chip damage, and she's just going to do a ton of damage for me just sitting here taking it. Again, there's a lot of things I can do about what she's doing here, but this is just to show how much chip damage she does. When she has no meter, I take no chip damage. I'm chilling. My risk gauge is going up. It's going to be very sad if I get hit, but outside of blocking special moves, my HP is not going down. And finally, when she has 50 meter, you do chip damage, but it's less than when you have 100 meter. This whole sequence won't do anywhere near as much as when I was blocking when she had a full stick of butter, as they call it. She has very good mix-ups with meter. And her defense is actually quite good despite not having a meterless reversal. She has both a 4-frame 5P that's mashable, and the 19-frame backdash. So if you ever wonder why you keep seeing Geo players slamming on backdash, that's the main reason why. Her main weaknesses, despite her great neutral, her normals are kind of stubby. It might sound funny considering she has this move that has been weakened since the game came out, but generally, this character is approaching you and attacking directly. Her effective range is kind of limited by the fact that she has to step to get to you. And I'm sure if you watch this character play, you have seen times where people quite literally dash up twice, but doing this means they're putting themselves in harm's way. It's also pretty uncommon she could loop mix-ups, mostly because they made her 214K a soft knockdown. I don't think this is a big deal, but it's still worth noting, because in this patch she generally converts to breaking the wall, or going up into her powered Spiral Arrow. That's a very advantageous guard crush, but it's still worth mentioning. So now we're starting to go to the very tournament relevant characters. So the next character we have to talk about is Anji. Anji is a character that mental stacks you in both neutral and on offense. So what's good about him? One comes from his new move. This move is incredibly hard to deal with and basically made it so that a lot of the old strategies against spin don't work, and you do actually have to do nothing or approach him in a safe way or with meter. He does have a lot of HP. And he has the most guts in the game, so you can count on him having 50 meter. His conversion ability is Omega buffed, so not only does he have Red Wild Assault, but he also has this launching 5H, which enables him to go into combos. And they made it so Naguriyuki could be followed up by attacks. So even though it's -7, and some characters can punish it heavily, he gets a combo if he hits you. Some characters are pretty trash at punishing this, by the way. His mental stack is quite good, so Fusion has a bunch of follow-ups between the fan, the hop, the low, the overhead, and of course you can simply do nothing. So when he's doing it from a safer range, combined with delay canceling, it can actually be pretty hard to cover the spread of options he has. Not to mention he can power up Fusion by holding it, changing the attack level, which means you need different counterplay depending on what he chooses to follow up with. A good example would be the overhead follow-up. So normally, this is a pretty easy mash, but with the increased block stun from the powered up Fusion by holding the button, he can actually hit 4-frame normal. So you So if someone's not prepared for this, it could be pretty difficult to deal with. And again, with delay, cancels, and resets, it could be pretty challenging to deal with. And he converts off pretty much everything if he hits you. Finally, since he pretty much is guaranteed to get 50 meter, he has some of the best defense in the game with 50 meter. This is his parry. This move is active for 30 frames and has 10 frames of recovery. So unlike Baiken's parry, which Baiken's parry at a baseline has some pretty simple counterplay. You're either using a projectile or delaying a normal in order to fight it. Counterplay for Anji's parry is much more uncommon. But now weaknesses. The big thing about Anji is that his pressure has many spots where they can be reversed if you read him or know what the character does. So this string, for example, not only has a gap between the far slash and the 5H, but if I react properly after fusion, I'm able to counter it with an air combo. So his HP kind of makes up for this, but similar to characters like Potemkin, this is something you have to be really comfortable with if you want to play the character. On top of that, his frame data in general is not great. Many things he does are very punishable, and also pretty easy to whip punish. Again, though, you have to worry about spin all the time, so it requires a lot of discipline to not casually swing into Anji. Also, because of the majority of his offense being disadvantageous, this makes him actually weak to dash block in ways that are different than other characters we've talked about, where I said they're just weak against fast characters like Faust or Axl. Finally, because of all these gaps and points of interaction, things tend to have a clear solution. So once you understand the character, you pretty much know why you lost to him and what you could do about it. And the main question ends up being, can you reverse the situation in a meaningful way? The example from before was with this, where Naguriyuki is -7, but Baiken doesn't get a meaningful punish, unless I'm kind of close. But because of her conversion problems, you often can't get anything that actually discourages him from continuing to do this. Usually requiring resource to do so, and he's a character that you don't build a lot of resource against because he's trying to spin all your moves. So next character we're going to talk about is Jacko. So Jacko is a surprisingly fast character with good neutral and block string offense. So for strengths, she has many ways of accessing her strong situation, which is simply having a minion on the screen. When she has minions on the screen, she's just far more powerful and has far more lanes of control than when she has nothing. Her burst situation is obscenely strong, and this is because she can just burst into minion. There are also characters where they burst her and she just pulls minion, but it's much less common than Season 2. Once this character gets started, she's able to maintain offense for an extended period of time pretty easily, on top of having good mix-ups as well. She builds meter and she's tricky in neutral for a few reasons. This is another character with the DLC 2K that goes under things, and the fast backdash. But because she's doing special move, swing into minion, clap, 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 she's also building resource incredibly quickly from full screen. Finally, she has both good ways of just setting lines on the screen, great anti-airs between her low profile 2K, her crouching anti-air in 2S, her preemptive 6H, and of course 6P. And despite not being the fastest character, although while holding a minion she's actually quite fast, she also has two of the best lunging moves in the game, her 5H and her sweep. Sweep specifically is really active and low profile, so it's very obnoxious to deal with if you don't have good counterplay. So, weaknesses. So one, her dash jump is not great. This might not sound like it matters, but it just means she's not good at escaping the corner. There's nowhere left to backdash. While this is good, it is 6 frames. So her not being able to clear this is certainly a weakness, and she usually has to escape by trying to super dump into JH or stall with JD, on top of trying to dash block and fight out that way, but she's not that great at it. As mentioned in strength, she's not necessarily that fast at actually moving. She's much faster at doing stuff. She does a lot of actions. So take this sequence for example. Minion pull, jump, drop, hit, air dash, button, 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 clap, button. So she's building resource with each of these little actions. That's the thing that's fast about her, not her movement. She is a 2-step character, so she does have the weakness that other 2-step characters have. She's just like one of the best at it, because all she needs to do is place this minion to become way stronger than normal. She has to rock, paper, scissors to get stuff started sometimes. So if she's not able to just place a minion easily, Then she has to play guessing games on where in her pressure is she going to do what. Between minion set, minion pull retreat, minion pull into jump, and wild assault, and more. All these things have responses, and this is the main point where people can fight back before they're swarmed by minions. And finally, she just dies kind of fast. You notice she took slightly over 50% from this combo compared to previous characters like Anji and Slayer, who took probably closer to around 30-35%. Next up, we have Ramlethal Valentine. So this character is a mid-range character with good neutral and corner control. She accomplishes this by using her swords, which are assigned to her S and H buttons, and she can choose to throw her swords, and she uses this for combos and pressure. Strength. So JS, this is honestly just one of the best air buttons in the game. Very difficult for some characters to deal with, and basically invalidates some characters in matchups, and is one of the main reasons why she beats a lot of characters. Her corner pressure is famously good, and this also ties into her building resource quickly, because like Chipp, there are a lot of places where I can do something. If I'm wrong, I die, and she's building a ton of meter the whole time. But unlike Chipp, a lot of these things are actually plus. So the sword toss is plus, the rock is plus, etc. So if you don't know what to do about this, it could feel extremely oppressive, and this has been strong basically since the game has come out. She's effective at many ranges. Close, maybe a couple character lengths away, mid-range, and far range. At this range, she has things like rock to kind of just discourage people from doing nothing. At mid-range, she has her great far slash and 5H. At around this range, she has her amazing kicks, and once you're here, you're just doing pressure normally. She's also quite fast at mid-range. So while she's finally weighed down by her giant swords, unlike the game's launch, her initial dash is still quite fast. So she is still quite explosive from mid-range, which is generally where she's playing at. Also, the dash nerf does not affect her corner pressure at all, because you're doing most of the pressure from around here to here. And once you become skilled with Ramlethal, her conversion ability is actually quite good. It's not for free, but she has various ways of breaking the wall between using 2H, Red Wild Assault, and meter. Her main weaknesses being low HP, so slightly more than 50% HP here. Another, she's relatively easy to whiff punish. The main question being, does your character have something that makes her feel this? And finally, she's not very good at reversing defensive situations. So the biggest problem is she doesn't have a fast crouching normal. So here, I'm actually throwing her 2P. 2K has a similar problem. So the answer here would be to use 5P. But it's kind of counterintuitive to hit 5P as your fastest mash for many characters. So it's kind of hard for her to wiggle out of defense unless she jumps out. So next we have Asuka, a high-speed zoner with overwhelming control in neutral. So what is good about Asuka? So one is another character that acts quickly. And what I mean is that once he's doing his thing, he's just doing things quickly. Similar to Jacko, he has a powerful burst. Both when you burst him and when he bursts you, he generally has an advantage, which is incredibly strong considering burst is supposed to be used to reverse situations. He has lots of control over his game plan. Once he makes you block, he can swap into different test cases and do what he wants. And he builds a ton of meter by doing all these actions because he does all special moves and you're blocking them. So he's able to get to a point where he can use the draw super very quickly. And because of this, he has excellent comeback factor. Also, because of this, he's good at reversing situations, because after negative moves, he can choose to use a chant or mash into a chant to start his own offense. So his main problems, his skill floor is actually incredibly high, so it actually takes a while to get to the point where it becomes really obnoxious to fight him. Mistakes can end games with him. His ability to reverse situations rely heavily on what cards he has in play, and one thing that actually happens quite a bit is that if he ends on a bad hand and someone bursts then, or uses YRC then he might be locked out of playing for the rest of the round. So the next character we're going to discuss is Bridget. Bridget is a high-speed mid-range zoner. She's a little similar to Axl in that she zones with normals, but she also has a yo-yo projectile that she can both use as a straight-up fireball and as a mine somewhat to control space. So for strengths, one, her defense is pretty good. So despite having low invulnerability on her backdash, it is incredibly fast and travels far. Her 2K is 5 frames. She has strong defense, DPRC into high-low. She has big buttons that just got buffed. And simple but strong 50-50s that are layered. And if people don't have responses for them, then she can push her offense for a very long time. She's also quite good in burst situations because of being able to set the mine. Some characters have problems dealing with her setting this up. For weaknesses, the common starter is HP. Where again, she took slightly over 50% of her life bar. Her having a 4-frame invincible backdash means that characters can cover her backdash and DP at the same time, depending on their structure, so that is kind of rough for Wake Up. She doesn't do a lot of damage most of the time, so some characters don't really care about taking risks against her that much. And since her damage isn't that high, we have talked about a bunch of characters with high HP that she has to hit a lot and give them 50 meter. So characters like Anji, like Slayer, she is giving them meter while hitting them over and over, and that's their chance to come back, and you usually have to overcome that. So next we gotta talk about Kai Kiske, the poster boy. Maybe not, I guess Soul's the actual poster boy. Kai is a standard character that's flexible at all ranges. By standard character, he just doesn't really have any gimmick at all. He's a pretty generic fighting game character in that he has good mid-range pokes, but a fireball that lets him attack at all ranges. His strengths are that his defense is actually pretty good between mashing and a good DP and a fast low profile move. For a character of this archetype, he actually is quite fast. He really books it. He's significantly faster than Soul, it feels like. His buttons are overall good and have gotten continuously buffed since the game came out. Between far slash, 2S, frame data on his 2 and 4S, and more. His conversion ability is overall good. It is a character out of their backdash. It is very easy for him to convert, in addition to having Red Wild Assault. Finally, between his speed, pokes, and fireballs, he's able to just play at all ranges very effectively. Even when things like his air fireballs might whiff, he's still getting meter for doing them, so it's still good. So his main weaknesses, he's somewhat linear as a character, so he's generally playing neutral at single jump height or on the ground. A lot of his best pokes are horizontal, as is his fireball. And characters have to be playing pretty passively to let him get away with stuff like charge stun edge generally. While his frame data is better than Anji's, you do also have to be pretty comfortable with overextending with the character. But thankfully, since he builds a lot of meter, this is fine, you could hedge your bet. And finally, while he has a variety of defensive options, since his DP is slow, option coverage is pretty easy against him until he gets 50 meter. So now we've joined the final group of characters, the GOATs, the characters we've seen all the time, mostly since they came out or since the game came out. We're going to start with Happy Chaos. And Happy Chaos is a powerful control type character who can enact his game plan from any range. So what is good about this character? One is the H button. I have been playing fighting games for more than 15 years. I'm a 3-time EVO runner-up in 3 different games. I also got top 8 at the first EVO for this game. I've won many tournaments that you've heard of, like Combo Breaker and CEO and NEC and all sorts of tournaments. I have never seen a move like this insane in a fighting game ever. There's only a couple of parallels I've seen over my time playing Arxis games. This thing is truly ridiculous. He has the RNG shot where he could just whiff pokes and maybe just hit you just because. And especially when you're cursed, the jump H is incredibly powerful. There's counterplay to him using this, but it's quite difficult. And if you ever feel like people are trolling, mashing backdash and stuff, it's usually because they're trying to screw up the reticle. Having this means that his control over neutral is just levels beyond many characters. And if a player's neutral awareness isn't quite there, the reticle makes up for it because you can whiff and hit people. He also has simple and strong mix-up because he has a 5D that's safe, and he has the cross-up roll that's quite fast. His resources are relatively easy to manage, and his main difficult point is getting the first focus in neutral. Once the game has gone on for a long time, since he's good at building resource, it is pretty trivial for him to use super focus to fix problems. But getting this first initial focus is tough because he uses a lot of concentration in his patch, so he does have to concentrate pretty early into the neutral game. He has both a low profile 2K, but not a totally low profile one, so you can actually hit him out of it compared to other characters I've shown. But he also has the fast DLC backdash. But also he has moves that don't look very strong on their own, like his 6S, that combined with the H button become incredibly powerful. Finally, because of the H button, he's able to convert basically all hits into wall break. While this combo is far from optimal, many characters dream of doing ID back JS into a wall break. This character's main weakness is defense. He's both not that great at getting out of the corner, and he doesn't really have any invincible anything, so no meters reversal, no reversal super or anything. He has to use system mechanics or his backdash to escape. It might sound funny considering how much you've probably seen him escape the corner like this, or mash out into something like this, or mash out into something like this, or mash out into something like this. But all these actually require him committing to the action. So many Happy Chaos losses come from them blocking. So then we have Soul Badguy. So Soul is an all-around type character with good defense, good health, high damage, and strong pressure. Funny enough, those are his strengths. But what is good about this character? One, he's pretty explosive. So I'm talking about neutral here in particular. While he's not very fast, he's slower than Kai. He has very explosive moves he could just do, like Bandit Revolver, Bandit Bringer, Night Raid Vortex, 6S from very far. He's also able to play in a lot of ranges. Not safely because he's generally coming at you, but he just has buttons for pretty much every situation, which is quite valuable. As is tradition, I have to do an unoptimal Soul combo in a video. His damage is quite high. You could basically make stuff up and do a pretty decent combo. And Soul players are pretty good at just building new combos because he has to change his combos pretty much every patch, but he consistently does high damage since the game has come out. On top of high damage, his conversion ability is also pretty good. It's pretty uncommon that he can't get something. The big change he got recently is that if you backdash a far slash, he's able to convert, which he was not able to do before. Finally, he does have very good defense. It's mostly in numbers, so he has a 3-frame normal, a 4-frame normal, 5-frame normals on crouching, and a DP. So he has a lot of stuff that people have to look out for on defense. Finally, while he has good offense, he has a lot of moves with frame advantage. Close slash, far slash being plus, which means he can do it from neutral. And Fafnir. Despite his seemingly straightforward offense, his offense is very good at countering passive defensive options, on top of having various ways of doing 50-50s. Some of these being possible from neutral. So he pretty much just has something in every situation that leads to meaningful reward. His main weaknesses is that he's just not that fast, and he's kind of stubby. He doesn't have a normal far slash, he's advancing into you. So a lot of matchups are him running into stuff he can't really do anything about until he hits you and then runs his game plan. Or he gets 50 meter and runs at you and does this. Next, we return to Sin. Sin is an all-around type character with good defense, decent health, high damage, and strong pressure. I feel like I just said this about Soul, but Soul taught Sin how to fight, apparently. Maybe I'm forgetting Guilty Gear lore. So it makes sense that Sin has a similar type of style to Soul, at least as character type goes. Unlike Soul, he specifically excels in mid-range. And similar to Soul, he is explosive with his special moves. The big one, elephant in the room, is another animal, Elk Hunt. But he also has Beak Driver for mid-range, on top of good normals. He has good conversion ability, so not just with normal things, but also with Wild Assault. His damage is quite high, even though Tyrant Barrel is nerfed from 3.0, and he has top in class defense, as his DP is extremely hard for characters to deal with, and in general, anti-DP strategies don't work on Sin. He has a couple of main weaknesses. His mix-up game is not very good, so while they did give him Hoof Stomp and Elk Hunt as high-low options on top of 6k, a slow-low that's +4. With training, you can react to these moves with a pretty high success rate compared to 50-50s that other characters have. Things like Yo's on Sen or Bad Moon. His other major weakness is that he just isn't that actionable at full screen. Even Soul has a projectile. Sin starts being scary from around this range. So if a character makes it hard for him to get to this range for some reason, he ends up struggling. Next, we have Mei. Mei is a surprisingly fast character with powerful mid-range and counterpokes. So, for strengths, 1, it actually is Dolphin. So, Dolphin is fast, it travels, it's safe on block, on counter hit, you get good return. Dolphin is just very good at dealing with all sorts of things. She arguably has the best defense of any character that doesn't have a meterless reversal between her fast 5P, good fast far traveling backdash, and, while a little bit controversial, using her whale super into PRC. Her odd jump makes her pretty hard to anti-air. Even very basic combos that are not optimal do a ton of damage. And while traditionally her conversion ability was not that great, with the addition of Red Wall Assault, her pokes that she used to not convert lead into wall break. Finally, she's just hard to burst in general. Not to mention her close slash also being burst safe. For weaknesses, one of her big ones is that she is stubby. So, despite her being a GOAT counter poker, if you don't swing into the button, she actually does not control that much range. So, there's the possibility that she swings into things. Also, a lot of her best conversions will rely on her having burst or getting a counter hit. The next character is Goldlewis Dickinson, a forceful, big body type brawler with surprisingly strong neutral tools. So, for strengths, where do I even begin, honestly? Side note, but there are people who think he's the best character in the game right now. That is up for debate, but I think he's an easy top 3. For starters, he has neutral tools that, for lack of a better word, play the game for you. So, I already mentioned Happy Chaos, the H button, but he has 2 major ones. The main one is Drone. While we're safe this patch, and it goes away on hit, it does not go away on block, making it pretty difficult to deal with for the majority of the casts. And it travels a very, 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 very long range. The other one being more situational because he needs meter and security, which is the laser that appears from behind you. That also does not go away on hit on block. The other one being more situational because it also costs tension, but it's the laser that does not go away on hit or block. He has one of the best jump ins in the game in Jump D. This move is incredibly fast and is disjointed, so it's very, very hard to anti-air. And typically you have to go either above the move or somewhat be inside so you can 6P. It is much more difficult to do this in a match than showing it here though. But on top of that, he has best-in-class anti-air, so his 6P has been improved many times, but he also has his 2P, which is very fast, low total duration, and disjointed. His conversion ability is very consistent, and it's pretty much expected that everything leads into hard knockdown. And even a baby combo like this does a significant amount of damage. His offense is very good. His whole idea is that everything is guard crush. A lot of these things have a ton of frame advantage. So, for example, if for some reason you struggle at doing strike throw, you can take advantage of his plus unblock guard crushes to make your strike throw an actual 50-50, where I tried to mash my fastest move, 5P, which is 4 frames, and it does not work because I have no throw protection. He is also able to do this with his very fast highs and lows. This one being a double-digit frame advantage, again I cannot mash. He has very strong 50-50 mix-ups, along with mental stack options. Things like this, while reactable, is a double-digit advantage guard crush. Not to mention situations like this with the drone, where the drone actually combos here, making it very scary strike throw. On top of having White Wild Assault and high HP. Compared to many of the casts, this did less than 50% damage. His main issues tend to be that he's not really good at reversing defensive situations. They just buffed this move to 7 frames and the Goldlewis player celebrated. That kind of lets you know that he's not really good at mashing out of situations. This move is 5 frames, but it's really, really small. And it loses 6P. His backdash is a 6 frame invincible one, so again, 6 frame invincible, I believe it's 22 frames total, so you can react to it on when they do it. So once you do corner him, it's pretty difficult for him to get out. And on top of that, he is a big body, so there are things that hit him that don't hit other characters. So next up we have Leo Whitefang. Leo Whitefang is an all-around type with good defense, good health, good damage, and strong pressure. We pretty sure you've heard this before. However, he specifically excels in rushdown and mix-ups. So for strengths, his dash is incredible. He has a step dash like Geo. You can't stop it instantly-ish the same way Geo can with directions, but you can do it with FD and buttons. This makes dash blocking of him an incredibly strong strategy because you're dashing into things that are generally minus on block. His buttons are all around good. His dash 2K especially is a best-in-class normal, as is his 5K. Far Slash has been improved over time, and 5H has always been a pretty good button. His 6P is best-in-class, and so his jab. His mix-up is simple and strong. We have two characters who have some of the best throws in the game. Baiken has the amazing left-right, but so does Leo. On top of that, since he has a back turn stance, he has access to simple, strong mix-ups with an unreactable-ish overhead. I mean, you pretty much can't though. Everyone gets hit by it in back turn H, along with back turn K, and even dash cancels. His defense is also top in class, so not only does he have a good 6P, but he has a flash kick, so unlike parry, which is a quarter circle, or a typical DP that's forward, down, down, forward, his is essentially up and a button because you should be holding down back while you're blocking. Finally, despite the normals and his dash, he's surprisingly effective at all ranges because he has a fireball that, especially with dash momentum, reaches quite far. They just buffed this in a recent patch too to be faster. So for weaknesses, he has some kind of odd things. So one, his slash and heavy slash buttons are not disjointed. So both this and this are not disjointed, where typically this and this would be disjointed. In Baiken's case, both these buttons are disjointed. So his answers to stuff in neutral are usually different than others, and it usually involves using dash kicks or just straight up dashing into them. Again, it might be counterintuitive if you haven't played him, so it makes it a little awkward to pick him up at the beginning. And then, similar to Ram, he is not good at mashing, which sounds odd. So his 2P is 6 frames, so I was able to grab it after close slash. So he has to do the counterintuitive mash a standing button in 5P. Finally, outside of a lot of the very strong characters of interactable offense, his is some of the most that matters. This would actually take a while to explain, so if you want, again, I'm going to show my teammate Jonathan Tene. He made a video about how to defend against Leo that will explain all the little things about all the various gaps that Leo has in his offense and what you can do to mitigate Leo pressure and what they will do about it. And finally, the last character we're going to talk about in this video is Naguriyuki. So Naguriyuki is a slow, tanky character that can use his resource to force approaches and rush down his opponents. So for starters, he is amazing at basically all ranges. So at max range, he has Clone. While it looks good, he could also follow it with Teleport to follow up behind it. He has Beyblade, big buttons, great kicks. A rare one is he can kind of slow the game down because while he's not quick, he does have moves that take up a lot of space. So he does have the ability to kind of just walk back and forth and just kind of wait people out. Especially when he has resource because he's so explosive. His damage output is high. He has White Wall Assault, an amazing command grab, and good rushdown in various forms. His weaknesses, so defense. So he can't dash block. So he's actually pretty hard. It's actually pretty hard for him to reverse defensive situations. His backdash is a heavy backdash, so it's reactable. And when he does have limited resources, he takes more damage, and he's much more linear. He can't do a lot of things. And alright, so that's the tier list. That's everybody. Specifically here, I want to talk about what changed and why. So I tried to summarize the character strengths and weaknesses. There's obviously more stuff I could have talked about on both strengths and weaknesses for all the characters on this list. If you've watched other character analysis videos on this channel, you see that they're generally between 20 and 30 minutes because there's actually quite a bit to talk about for these characters. First thing that changed is the addition of an extra rank. So I didn't use the same names, it was basically like the same idea. So the main thing was that adding an extra tier on the top pretty much, because I just think those characters have not only been just generally super strong in 3.0 in general, but also with the exception of Sin and arguably Goldlewis have been good basically the entirety of the game, or the entirety that they have been in the game. Remember, this game came out in June 2021, and right now it's July 2024, so it's been quite a long time. Pretty much, I'm saying the top two groups are your best chance of winning large international events. And Really, the difference between the top group and the second group, outside of what I mentioned before, is that the second group just has more actionable flaws, which means they have more bad matchups, more things they struggle against. Then I want to talk about characters who are down. So there are a few characters that are down pretty much for the same reason. So Kai, I think he's very, very good, but I think the biggest reason why I thought he was S tier in 3.0 was how Wild Assault worked in 3.0. Chipp was the same. I thought Chipp was broken in 3.0, and probably the number one thing he lost to me from my perspective is Wild Assault got changed. In 3.0, he had unburstable wall break from 2K, pretty much. So if you didn't burst 2K 6P, you were just done. Ram is another character that is affected by Red Wild Assault being nerfed in 3.5. Geo would be a little bit different. So Geo is down from the previous list. I don't think she got too much from Wild Assault in 3.0. I just think the characters above her are either more solid or just more memes than her. She's just like a standard, straightforward, kind of honest character until she gets 50 meter and just starts mixing you nonstop. Like above her, you have normal tracking person, burst into drone, flash kick, clone Fukyo, backdash quarter circles. You have a lot of memes above her. Ino is another character that I thought the main juice that she had was having Red Wild Assault. Her conversion ability is still much improved because of her new special move, but the unburstable part from Wild Assault doing so much burst damage was a huge part of it as well. Axl is slightly down. I think it's mostly from him being a polarizing character design in general, but I don't think he's like massively flawed. I think that's just always been a thing about Axl in Guilty Gear, is that there are characters he just dumps on and characters that he just struggles against naturally. Faust is actually pretty solid right now, and I think he has a good chance to be a tier up from here if we had more time. But it is hard for me to say he has the same amount of flaws as characters below him, for sure. Then we have Johnny and Elphelt. So a lot of people rate Johnny and Elphelt in the worst group of characters, but at this point, we've seen these characters cook so much when they're in their good situations, and they are clearly accessible. Plus, they have good neutral stuff going for them, that I think it's unfair to say the characters are niche or paracript. Johnny is able to get his advantageous position in most matchups, and he always builds 50 meter because he has a lot of HP, so he kind of always has a chance to reverse the situation. And Elphelt in particular, her fundamental strength is much better than I gave it credit for. The combination of big buttons and speed used effectively, plus her offense is very, very good. And if you don't have a meterless reversal or you have a poor backdash, you really hate fighting Elphelt. So in Millia's case, Artemis definitely helps, but she still has the same overall problems of when she's rushing you down, it's not scary because her throw's not scary, and like the other fast characters, she's not able to attack from a safe range. So you just have to play kind of risky with her no matter what, and typically in Guilty Gear, she's a pretty safe character, so that's like one of the main things that makes her really strong in Guilty Gear history. While Baiken stocks were definitely up at the beginning of this patch compared to 3.0, her fundamentals and advantage states are actually amazing, so really that conversion ability problem is a big deal. Also, I do think they take stuff away from her that they take away from the rest of the cast, but sometimes they'll let other characters have it and they'll forget to give it back to Baiken, or they'll nerf something about Baiken, but then nerf something about the system and then not revert the Baiken change. So for instance, in 3.0, they nerfed her parry damage, and I thought it was because she could do parry, fast RC, charge blue wild assault to do parry into unburstable combos into wall break. That sounds incredibly powerful, right? But they nerfed the burst damage on wild assault, rightfully so, but the parry damage is still down. Or how many characters who have special moves, the follow-ups are not medium counter hits anymore, now they're small counter hits. Characters like Sin and technically Nago still have special move follow-ups that are medium counter hits, which means they get huge returns. Not to mention that Sin's follow-up is -3, so you pretty much can't punish it, where Baiken's is -7, so you literally punish it when she does it. But I don't think she would need as major of a rework as Millia. I think they just need to let her convert and she'll be fine. Jacko, we massively underrated. So if the season 2 character was Soul for going to Asia and being like, this character's ridiculous, then for season 3 it's definitely Jacko. Jacko is really, really good. She has the S tier super, her speed of action, meaning she's just doing a lot of stuff really fast and building a ton of meter, and having more ways of summoning, which means she has more ways of accessing her win condition faster, are all very good. Bridget, similarly, speed of action, very important. Just like Jacko, she has more ways of RPSing into setting her advantageous position, and her buff normals help out a ton. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. This one was a big one, but this is the final tier list for season 3.5. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I stream pretty much every day on twitch.tv/LordKnight on weekdays. And if you're interested in coaching for this game, or if you're watching in the future randomly for other games in the future, I do have a Metafy, metafy.gg/@LordKnight. Like and subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out. Hey you, are you tired of Bridget merch? Because if so, you don't want to skip this ad, because this video is brought to you by Totokami Apparel. This company started off with gamer-based apparel based on roles like tanks or DPSs and MMOs, but now they're about to drop some Guilty Gear merch. So peep this Testament cardigan. You can tell they put a lot of detail into the design, and there's subtle nods to the character in the sleeves and on the back. Pre-orders come with a Faust bag if you want. I will not judge you for that. And once again, shoutouts to Totokami Apparel for sponsoring this video.